welcome in. It's the Breer Report for March the 13th. We promised you a Breer Report on Friday morning. We're coming to you a little bit early here on Thursday afternoon. We got plenty to get to. The first wave of free agency is essentially in the books. There are still some big name players out there, in particular, big name older receivers, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, a bunch of guys who I think are waiting for the market to settle a little bit. Stephon Diggs still out there. And those guys, it could take a few more days for those guys to find their homes. Some of those guys could take visits, which is a little bit of a different approach in today's day and age, but you see it sometimes with older players. But we want to focus today on the quarterback market and where the quarterback market is going. And I think any discussion on the quarterbacks here during this week of free agency has to start with Aaron Rodgers. And the reality is these teams are doing what everyone else is doing. They are sitting there waiting. I don't think money is the issue right now. I think it really comes down to what Aaron Rodgers wants to do. And considering all of his options, those options could include retirement. And I wouldn't completely rule that out, although he did tell the Jets in his exit meeting that he intends to play in 2025. And certainly he wouldn't be seeking his release from the Jets if it weren't for having some desire to play. But I wouldn't completely rule out retirement. I don't think you can rule out anything. And then there are the two teams that we've talked about. We'll talk about the wild card here in a second, but the teams that are really waiting on a decision from Aaron Rodgers, and those would be the Steelers and the Giants. And I think, one thing you have to look at here is what Aaron Rodgers has already been through and what he would go through with those two teams. So what he's already been through, what he went through the last 2 years with the Jets, was he joined a young team with a lot of young talent on it. And the idea was he was going to come in and elevate the entire program and take the program to the next level after not having won for a long time. To me, that's the Giants in this equation. The same way the Jets had Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and Jermaine Johnson and Quinnen Williams and Quincy Williams and Sauce Gardner. The Giants have a lot of promising young players. Malik Neighbors, Andrew Thomas is established, but he's still younger. Tyrone Tracy. On the defensive line, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau. Deonte Banks is a high pick who they still have high hopes for. You look across the roster, you can see some promising young talent where you say, okay, maybe Aaron Rodgers can come in and elevate these guys the same way the Jets were hoping that he could come in and elevate the core. With the Steelers, it's different. With the Steelers, they're asking him to come in and be the final piece of the puzzle. And there are more contemporaries of Rodgers in there. TJ Watt's turning 31, Minkah Fitzpatrick's turning 29, Cam Hayward, obviously he's an older player. At the very end of his career. And they acted with some urgency already this offseason and going in and bringing DK Metcalf into the fold. And DK Metcalf is a guy who's on his third contract, so he's not younger anymore either. The reality of it to me, when I look at this situation, is I think the Giants would be asking him to do, again, a lot of what the Jets were asking him to do. Does that appeal to him? Maybe. Does the idea of getting vengeance in the same city where he just went through everything he went through the last 2 years, does that resonate with him? Maybe it does. But on the other side, you'd be kind of setting up for the guy to walk into a situation that's ready-made. They've been winning there for a long time. They're not in the middle of some drought the way the Giants are. This is a good team that's looking to level up and become a great team. And for that reason, I still think, and this is just my opinion, but I still think Pittsburgh is the most likely scenario. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I still think they're the most likely scenario for Aaron Rodgers. And then you have the wild card, which is the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings put something very competitive to the 1-year, $14 million offer that the Colts signed. Colts signed Daniel Jones to in front of Jones. They also made an effort to keep Sam Darnold. They couldn't compete with Seattle, giving him the opportunity to be a multi-year starter there with J.J. McCarthy still on the roster. But very clearly, they want to give themselves an insurance policy against McCarthy. And doesn't mean they don't think McCarthy can be their quarterback for the next decade and a half. They still believe that. But J.J. McCarthy lost a bunch of weight while going through the rehab with the 2 knee surgeries. The second one more of a cleanup. JJ McCarthy lost four months of development time. So if you're Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and all the guys there, you're looking at it and you're saying, is there something here that we can do to make sure that we can look at our locker room and look at the guys that won 14 games with a straight face and say, yes, we are doing everything we can to win right now. We're doing everything we can to maximize this window that we're in with this core of players and this coaching staff. And I think that's sort of where they're at right now and where they were or where they have been over the last week or so. Now, what would Aaron Rodgers do? Well, Aaron Rodgers would basically mean pausing on the start of the JJ McCarthy era for a year. They don't have a ton of other options as far as insurance policies, again, against McCarthy now, with Jones off the market and Darnold off the market. So the question changes where it's like you're going from having somebody competing with McCarthy to having somebody replacing McCarthy for a year. The situation would be enticing to Rodgers, like it would be to any quarterback, the idea of having Kevin O'Connell as your coach and throwing to Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, having Aaron Jones behind you in the run game. All of that would appeal to Rodgers. My guess would be like the Vikings actually throwing their hat in the ring and actually making an offer to Aaron Rodgers would probably change the dynamic a bunch. They're still discussing that. So whether or not they actually throw their hat in the ring, we'll see. As of last night, I know they were still discussing it. Maybe they throw their hat in the ring now. It's obviously a fluid situation, and there's a lot going on. And part of what's going on, of course, is now Russell Wilson starting to take visits. And Russell Wilson, this will be our second topic for today, is where Russell Wilson is at with all of this. Now, there was a feeling that Russell was waiting to see what happened with Aaron Rodgers. Clearly, he's not waiting anymore. He visited with the Browns today. He's visiting with the Giants tomorrow. Clearly, he'd like the opportunity to start somewhere in 2025 too. And I would hope that he'd be aware that that opportunity isn't automatic. In the Browns, he's got a situation where he could go in and be the starter, at least for right now. The Browns had the second overall pick. They don't control whether or not Cam Ward falls to them unless they trade up. So they have no control over that situation. And we'll see where they stand on Shedeur Sanders. But if they don't like Shedeur Sanders to the point where they would consider him a value at the second overall pick, and Cam Ward goes one, then they need a quarterback for this year. And so Russell Wilson, they're kicking tires on him. I still think, and we'll get to him in a second, the Kirk Cousins might be the most likely scenario for them or the most enticing scenario for them. But he's not available right now. So they bring Russell Wilson in today. The Giants, same thing. They visited with him last year. They're going to visit with him again. Whether or not that results in the consummation of an actual relationship, if Aaron Rodgers goes to Pittsburgh, we'll see. If Aaron Rodgers winds up with the Giants, would Russell be welcomed back with the Steelers? I think that's a discussion that's still ongoing in Pittsburgh, and it's again like a little bit of a complicated conversation there. So Russell Wilson is still affected and still. A lot of like where he goes and what he does is still to some degree dependent on what happens with Aaron Rodgers, but he's not waiting for Aaron Rodgers anymore. And so I think that adds a layer to this whole thing that's really interesting. And then there's our third topic, which like I think this is the one that is maybe most intriguing to me, is the availability of Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins went in as we've been over the last few days and met with Falcons ownership and had a sit down with Arthur Blank last Wednesday night. So that's 8 days ago now. Told Arthur Blank that he would like to have the opportunity to start somewhere in 2025. And the Falcons more or less communicated that their feeling is that based on the investment they made in signing Kirk Cousins to the contract they signed him to, that it's a better value for them at $100 million over 2 years, which if you add the guarantee that would vest on Monday, $100 million over 2 years with the insurance policy on Michael Penix this year is a better deal for them than just taking the sunk cost of $90 million over 1 year. Now you can make the argument, of course, that with with everything that goes into being a young quarterback in the NFL and everything that goes into your first year starting, that you might be creating a healthier environment for Michael Penix if Kirk Cousins isn't in the room, if there isn't that threat to his job in there. And I think the idea there is if he has a rough first month, he doesn't have to look over his shoulder. And the room is really built around him, rather than having the former starter in there with him. And then, I think that there's the reality for the Falcons, which is, again, you're looking at the investment. And I do think they look at the business end of this. So to break down the business end of it, they've already paid him $62.5 million for a single year. That money is not coming back. Then they have $27.5 million for this year that is already fully guaranteed. That money, one way or the other, is getting to Kirk Cousins. And then if he's on the roster on Monday, $10 million of his money for 2026 becomes fully guaranteed. Now, that money can still be offset. So if Kirk Cousins were cut after this year and somebody's willing to pay him $15 million or $20 million to come and be their quarterback in 2026, then the Falcons would be completely off the hook. If nobody's willing to go to 10 million, well, then he's just going to get the minimum and the Falcons would be on the hook for the rest of it. So that's where you look at it and you say, okay, it'd be close to 100 million for over 2 years. So where's the solution here? You have the Falcons who are worried about their investment and doing good, sound business. You have Cousins who wants to play. And then you have a bunch of teams out there that might look at Kirk Cousins as a better option than Russell Wilson, that he might be a better option than Joe Flacco or anyone else who's out there. Well, my solution for this would be that over the weekend, before that guarantee vests, Kirk Cousins camp works with the Falcons together to go find a team that's willing to come in and buy a draft pick. And let's just say theoretically that the Falcons say, okay, we're willing to take on $15 million of the deal. So now you'd be saying to another team, you only have to pay $12.5 million for this year. So that's less than Daniel Jones got. That's less than Justin Fields got. And then maybe you can negotiate an agreement with Kirk Cousins and his agent and say, okay, you're going to get all your money this year. Then we'll have you on the books for $20 million next year. You already have the $10 million fully guaranteed. And the $20 million will give us an opportunity to keep you on the roster. So for us coming in and swooping in and giving up a draft pick to get you, you're giving us sort of the deal that Justin Fields has with the Jets now, where with the Jets, Justin Fields' deal says he's got $10 million fully guaranteed next year and $20 million total. It, I think, is a creative solution that could work. And if you're a team like the Browns and you look at it and you need some sort of economically feasible solution because you're working around the logistics of the $46 million that Deshaun Watson has fully guaranteed this year and the $46 million of guaranteed money Deshaun Watson has next year, maybe you look at this and you say, for 12.5, if we can have Kirk Cousins in here, yes, that's worth a 4th-round pick for us. So the Falcons then can walk away knowing that they got out of $12.5 million that they were committed to. They get their 4th-round pick. The Browns have their starting quarterback. They're only paying $12.5 million for him. Michael Penix has a cleaner environment to work in 2025. So when he needs to ride out, when the time comes and he has to ride out some bumps, there's no one that he's looking over his shoulder at. To me, it makes all the sense in the world. Whether or not that can get done between now and Monday, we'll see. But I do think there are 3 checkpoints in the Cousins saga. The first checkpoint is the one on Monday, as we explained. The second one would be on draft weekend, maybe after the first round of the draft, after a team or two didn't wind up getting a quarterback. Maybe there's a trade opportunity for the Falcons there. And then, at the start of training camp. So this, again, is a complex situation. Cousins would like to start. The Falcons don't want to do bad business. Penix is sitting there, I think, with the opportunity to have a cleaner environment. Again, if Cousins isn't around, doesn't mean they don't get along, but I think it would be a cleaner environment. To me, it just makes sense to try to work towards that solution. We'll see if they can get it done. Appreciate you guys coming out. Appreciate you guys checking out all our stuff all week on the website at themmqb.com. We will continue to bring you guys all this wall-to-wall coverage of everything that's going on in the NFL over the course of the next couple of months and really throughout the off season. The draft, of course, is up next after the owners' meetings. And we will start to ramp up our draft coverage here soon. But we will be, again, kind of still focused there on the veteran market when we get to next week. Our next Breer Report will come to you on Tuesday morning. I'll see you guys then.